3. Do you hear me?
Oh, Matthew,
Yeah, you cranked it up on your headset.
yeah, that would be better. Oh, Christmas. Take her anywhere, but you can't depend on her to do anything right. I've been told that by my children too many times. And they're all reasonably intelligent, so I have to, pay attention to them. Hey, go ahead and do it again.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Squeak, squeak, squeal.
Could you turn it down to 2 on your pack?
I had it on 4.
Yeah, that's why.
That's too high.
Yeah.
Got it on 3.
Okay. Alright. You wanna test it out?
How's that, Betty?
Go ahead again.
How's that?
That's good.
Good?
Yeah, I think so.
Alright, great.
If not, I'll cry.
If not, just knock on the door.
I do believe we are ready when he is. That's because I delayed him. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening. We come to you from the Liberty Street boardroom, and it's March 8th. I think it's International Women's Day. And so guess what? All you women, I hope you did something really terrific today and made a point in the world. Tonight, we have first on our agenda our council, and you've met Jim before. He's right here, ready for us, and he has got a number of things that he's going to do with us tonight that I think we'll find very, very helpful. We'll follow that by public comment, and then a little housekeeping, and then there will be a short work session by members. I look forward to next week when we do some follow-up of things that will be laid and explained today. And so you don't want to miss next week. That doesn't mean we're having hula dances or anything like that. We just have a good set of work to do. And so, Jim, you're
All right.
on.
Yeah, I'll take over. So Bill Ardinger and I spoke a couple of times over the last week, and what we decided to do, and Bill really took the lead on this, is to actually dig in and revise a version of the charter rather than working off of a preliminary document, which starts to feel kind of like theoretical. We just dug in, and he took the first go at it, and then I worked on it a little bit, and there really are right now 5 or 6 items that we're proposing to modify in the current charter. Bill and I also talked about being able. Yes, I'm not saying anything interesting.
Not yet.
We also talked about being able to combine different amendments by subject matter, and a little bit about what we thought we could call similar subject matter, because I think we all should be thinking about at the end of the day what the ballot's going to look like. I mean, I don't want to see a huge ballot with all kinds of different questions. You're just going to overwhelm people. So really kind of planning from that process backwards, we were able to, I think, combine a couple of items, and we did it by making the changes. I'll pass this around in a moment, but I don't want you to cheat and look ahead.
I think we all have it, Joe.
Oh, you do?
No, not that
Is that
one.
right? Oh, okay.
Hey,
There might have been a preliminary.
Bill
one.
may have sent it to Kate and
Edits, revisions.
I. No, on the contrary, I think it's excellent.
So
pretty tight.
we've been able to sort of put things together by subject matter, which I color coded. Today, what Bill wanted to do was just have me go through and kind of walk through all the changes in the document with you, and go through the language a little bit, and then answer some preliminary questions. But next week we would actually have, I think, a more substantive conversation. And once we agree on, all right, this sounds good, and that's, I guess you can come back, you don't have to agree to this now. Next week, come back, I don't like this, there's no consensus on that. But once we agree, we like this, then we'll put a preliminary report together based on what the final document looks like. And this will also drive what the ballot is gonna look like. Does that all make sense? And I wasn't here for all the conversations last week, so some of this is just based on what, reviewing minutes and talking to Bill, what you guys were looking for. So I'm gonna hand this around. We have a lot of copies, probably too many.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Olin.
Sorry.
Did you mark yours up? I think it's the same as this?
That's fine, yeah, no, I'm sure.
I
it is.
need one for Bill and one for Nancy, please.
You can keep the rest, or whatever you wanna do with the rest, pass them out. Frame one.
Thank you.
Okay, so the stuff highlighted in yellow, the first subject matter, if you will, is to eliminate or remove obsolete provisions of the agreement, whatever, charter. So the section pertaining to the original election of the Charter Commission, and the original, that whole section about election of officers and how that's gonna happen initially is obsolete. So 2 would be eliminated, and the current 3 would be replaced by, the current 2 would be replaced by what is current 3. And you'll see, ignore the green right now, we're just looking at the yellow. We're proposing here, and this is something we're gonna have to talk about from a legal standpoint. I know it's a big topic of the commission, but here we're eliminating section 3, which speaks to the election of the clerk and treasurer. So if we're not gonna elect them, then we're gonna eliminate that whole provision and address it later on.
Jim,
Yes.
can I ask you to go back to section 1?
Yep.
The green is hard to read.
Yeah, so ignore the green for now, we're gonna do color first.
Oh, okay, we're going by color.
Yeah, just do color first,
Oh,
otherwise we'll
okay,
just.
It's kindergarten, we'll
Yeah,
follow.
that's why.
Right.
And I use primary colors.
Well, thank you.
If you skip it, I know it's hard, there aren't that many options on colors, so we have this real awful olive green at some point, which is just terrible to look at. If you skip to the last page, you'll see here where we've eliminated the language establishing this commission. That's it. So that's light lifting, cleanup. The second subject matter, if you will, has to do with the election process and requirements for the election, and that's sort of all going to be in green. So the first thing we do on the first page is clarify that in the document, because there's this language in current section 3 that talks about a voting district, and then we have the school district, and that whole thing gets confusing. So we're proposing to define district in here as meaning school district, and then if you look on page 2 of the document, we are creating a new term, rather than calling it a school district or a school voting district, to call it a school voting zone. I don't know if people like the word zone. There's only so many options. Zone works for me. I think it works for this purpose. And there's all the other good words are taken. So if somebody has another idea for a word, throw it out there. So we're just replacing zone and cleaning that up in section 3. Section 4, which is a little hard to read, I agree. Goodness, that red and that green. If you're
Yeah, doesn't work.
that's not working for your eyes, I'll read it. It says only qualified voters of the district for at-large elections or of the school voting zone for school voting zone elections shall be eligible to cast ballots for the election of school board members. Okay, so that speaks to which voters and who's qualified in which elections they can participate in.
Is there a difference, Jim, between a qualified voter and a qualified voter residing in the district or the ward? Or the zone, rather? So I'm just thinking, I don't think so.
I don't think we're gonna be able to identify. They do identify who's eligible in certain wards, so if you're not a registered
If you're
voter,
not on the list of
you're not on the
eligible voters.
checklist, you're not gonna be able to vote in that particular
Just a
election.
thought.
So that's how it's divided up in a city.
And certain wards are divided among Concord School District and Merrimack Valley School District. I have to prove every time I go to vote that I'm the Concord School District and not the Merrimack Valley School District.
Is that Ward 1 or 2?
One.
How do you prove that?
It's on a list with by
Address.
address.
Yeah.
And so they verify it, and then I get a different ballot than the other people.
Got it. As you should.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think we're changing anything, we're just making this more clear, and I think what I went through and did was try to make the terminology clearer, because some of the phrasing was kind of odd, and there is room for tweaking in this, and I don't take pride of ownership, actually, I'm gonna blame
it's
Bill
good.
on any bad language, right?
good.
So, anything that's good, I did it, anything that's weird, it's from Bill, and he's not here to defend himself, so.
I'll tell him.
Yeah, just pass that along. So the real big thing which comes out of the conversation from last week, our last meeting from you folks, is on the next page in section 5. And I think you'll understand what we did here, but we really talked about qualifications to be elected, and we also get into the appointment process and vacancies. So it says here, qualifications and reporting. To be qualified for election to an at-large office of the board, the candidate must be a registered voter of the district. So that's obvious, right? At-large, district-wide. To be qualified, the candidate must be domiciled in the school voting zone. Okay? To hold any at-large office on the board, a person must maintain during the term of office a domicile in the district. So now that addresses the issue of moving. To hold a school voting zone office, a person must maintain during the term of office a domicile in that school voting zone. So that addresses that other issue. Whenever an at-large board member ceases to be a resident of the district, or a school voting zone member ceases to be domiciled in the school voting zone, the board shall declare the office of such person vacant and shall appoint a qualified person to serve the remainder of the term until the next election, when the voters of the district or school voting zone shall vote to elect a replacement for the unexpired term. So lots of stuff is actually packed in there, but that also reflects the, at least with respect to appointing vacancies in school districts, that reflects the state law in New Hampshire.
Well, and historically, I think probably Clint has filled the most vacancies, or been president when they filled the most vacancies. And traditionally, there has been a move to have a former school board member or one who just stopped or something. So seldom has it been a novice, and if it's been a novice, it's been a person who was the, like, runner-up in that particular zone. I'm using the new word. I think that we did have some conversation about filling those vacancies, but they don't occur often, and they're generally handled in a very rational way.
What I'll say is, and then Bill, I know you have a question, I may be able to sort of answer some of it. Bill, in a previous version that Bill and I were exchanging, we had put language in here directing the board to by resolution or by policy to adopt a process for appointing. I don't think the charter has to get into that level of detail. I mean, the board is charged with appointing, and they can determine how they wanna, how they wanna do that, so.
There already is a policy.
Yeah, there already is a policy, so, it's not like there's a million different options anyway, so I just left that out. They can decide how they wanna appoint.
So Jim, I just had one comment, which is, I think in that last sentence, to serve the remainder of the term until the next election is confusing.
I know, that's what it says in the law.
I think what you're saying is to serve the remainder of the term. Because if you add until the next election, that of course would always be the end of the term. But by adding until the next election, it suggests that the next election after the vacancy. I'm not suggesting you do one or the other with it, Dave. I'm just saying that it could be confusing, and I think you could solve the problem that way.
Yes,
It
sorry.
also suggests that the day of the election,
The winner.
the winner.
That's true,
doesn't
yeah,
have a
that's
number.
true.
That did happen one year. It wasn't necessarily problematic, but could be going forward.
Good point.
And rather than after the sort of canvass of the vote or whatever that process is, after the election and
No,
before.
because
And
your
new board
term,
members are typically seated in January, but this
Right.
would be, the start of the term would be the day after the election.
you could lose an election or decline to be reelected,
Okay,
and your term doesn't end until December 31st, or till when the
That's right.
new school board takes place.
so what should it say?
I think it should just say qualified person to serve the remainder of the term when the voters of the district. So if you move out of the ward voting zone in halfway through the first year, the appointee serves until the end of your
Yeah.
3-year term.
That way, it doesn't speak to when they take office, it just, okay. And then the rest of that sentence makes sense.
Right.
The voters will then elect someone to fill the remainder of, if it's 1 or a 2-year term, they'll fill the remainder of the term. All right,
And here's where I said it before, and I'll say it again. What tradition, at least as I remember it, if a person moved out of the zone, still still living in Concord, they would serve that remainder of that year. And
that's an
then-
option.
Is the way it's written an option?
No. Voted on the last time around.
Yeah, the way this operates is as soon as they leave the zone,
Yeah,
they've vacated the office.
all right.
And I didn't get into details about the board declaring the position vacant. I mean, we don't, it's a matter of,
But they have to replace it with someone from that
Yep.
zone.
once they are no longer domiciled in a zone, they've vacated that office. So it's a pretty restrictive rule, right?
is.
You may not want it to be that restrictive for, I think, purposes you debated, but that's how, I was told you wanted this
I
to be.
think that's exactly what we
Right, I
decided.
just want to bring it up again.
So, Dawn pointed out, and I don't know whether I'm confused here, if you're in your first term and you move, and therefore your seat's declared to serve the remainder of your term, but you're in your first year, so the remainder of your term is 2 years,
Right.
2.5 years. So then the very end of this, when the voters shall vote to elect a replacement for the unexpired term,
I think the
would then
unexpired
come out.
term should come out of that, just to
Right,
vote to elect a
So
replacement.
starting with for the unexpired term would then come out, is that, am I catching that?
The way I mean, this part I don't actually think you have flexibility under state law. When someone leaves office and you appoint, you're only allowed to appoint until the next election.
Right.
So what we're trying to say is the board's appointment is until the next election, then the voters elect someone to fill the balance of
rest
the
of it.
term. So if they leave in the first year of a 3-year term, the election is for the remaining, the next person elected is for a 2-year term. And it would say that on the ballot, it would say, so-and-so for a
But
2-year
then I
term.
think Bill's
But
edit
then
doesn't
what
work.
we need to say
Yeah.
is to take
That's what I
out
was
the phrase,
asking.
the remainder of the term, so that it will read, appoint a qualified person until the next election, when the voters of the district or school voting zone
I-
shall vote to elect or replace. a
So let me
person.
make an alternative suggestion on the E.B.
Yeah, you
White,
can't-
on the
you can't
E.B.
have
White
both.
theory of omitting needless words. I think you could take everything out of that sentence after the word term, to serve the remainder of the term.
But I think what they're saying, Bill, is a valid issue. If you're in the first year of a 3-year term, what Jim is saying is under state law, you can't have an appointed position for those 2 holdover years. You actually have to have an election.
Yeah, 671-33. And that's
Well,
how it
then-
is in the
then you'd have
charter,
to
it's how
take
it,
out- Then you'd have to take out the remainder of the term and just say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
until the
Until the
next
next
election,
election.
Right.
period.
Yeah.
and I think it's not, and from what I'm hearing, I, like, how I wanna leave this is, let me just, what I think it may be more nuanced, because it's until their office, they take office, or the new person takes office after the next election, because you have a sort of a delay built in there, so I may, right, you have an election and then a declaration and then a all that. I don't know the timeline here, so just let me fine tune that. I understand what we're saying, and I do agree. The statute uses this weird phrasing, remainder of the term until the next election, and I'm like, maybe there's a reason that phrase is there, but I don't think I understand what you're looking for, so I can revise that. That's not.
Well, yeah, you could just say, appoint a qualified person to serve until the next election, when the voters
Yeah.
will elect a replacement for the remaining portion of the term. Because you don't, that seat isn't then a 3-year term, it's whatever amount is left in that term.
Until an election.
Right. Well,
No, after
Which
the
is what
election.
we've typically done.
So like if somebody resigns in their first year, at the next election, the person elected is being elected for 2 years, not a 3-year term.
Yeah,
Which just recently happened, someone
It
elected for
happens
1
all the
year and
time.
then ran again.
Pam,
like I said, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot in there, and that's because you don't want to mess up the stacking of the terms, and you don't want to create a new 3-year term, and then like, well, what happens? And it gets confusing too when people file for candidacy, and there's 2 positions, and are they filing for the unexpired 2-year term, or but I think you have to have that all in there. I think Bill's suggestion is good. I jotted down some notes, and I can revise that. And if I make revisions, I'll recirculate a draft. So this is the next part. This is the reporting language. Again, I kind of borrowed from various charters and tried to keep it simple. In some charters, this provision is like a page long. The board, but I think we're sort of delegating the detail of how this is to be done to the board. But we're saying that the board shall, by resolution, regulate the reporting of political campaign contributions and expenditures made by or to any candidate, incumbent official, or political committee for the purpose of influence the nomination or election of any candidate for school board or charter commission or committee for the purpose of influencing the passage of any ballot question.
That sounds perfect.
what does the word committee refer to in that?
Yeah,
Because
that would-
committees of the board are determined by board members asking for what they want, and the president basically declaring the committee membership, and for ad hoc, it's usually invitational.
But I'm just asking in this
Yeah, that was in
language.
Bill's version, and I'm like, I thought maybe you had a reason for that, but I don't.
No,
I
we're
can't
not
think of it,
discussing
because if it can't be referring to school board committee, because if you need to file financial disclosures to get elected to the school board, you've already done it.
Yeah.
And school, you're, unless
Yeah,
there
like us, like not a
are there,
subcommittee of the
are there
board.
I don't ever
You're
remember.
never a candidate for a committee. You're never
Well, I
a
understand
candidate.
that, I understand that.
No,
Um,
but even the ad hoc committees that have community members, not board members,
that's-
they're not candidates, they don't run for those.
Let's take it out. I left it in thinking maybe you
Here's what
folks
I'm-
had a reason for it.
I'm trying for financial disclosures from
From Concord.
applicants for the charter, for
Yeah,
this
we
commission.
had to
For
do
us.
it.
Yeah, I know we have to do it, but
Oh, yeah, it is.
is there a charter? Yeah, because here's my question, Jim. And again, I think the language is fine with the suggestion we made, but do we need it? In other words, the school board could do this by resolution tomorrow.
If they remembered.
Or they could not, depending
Well,
on
right,
who
right,
takes
right.
over the
Yeah.
school board.
That's the issue, is whether, so,
Well, I'm fine, I'm
Yeah.
fine with it, I get it.
I think 49B lets you choose your form of government, which gives you more power to do things that I'd rather not leave that open for interpretation. All right, I'm gonna move on to the green. All right,
No, no
next
problem.
color, olive. We're turning to page 3, Article 6. This is easy. So this is really authorizing the board to set its own compensation. Under current law in New Hampshire, it really says that the legislative body of a school district at an annual meeting sets the compensation for the board. You don't operate under that, so you have to have a different process, and this really mirrors the process of letting the board set its own compensation. So the district shall pay board members an annual compensation amount which shall be established by resolution biennially prior to September 1st in the odd-numbered years, to take effect January 1st in the even-numbered years. And that's, again, the bill came up with that. And I don't really, I mean, whatever, it could say anything. It could be any timing.
But we haven't voted on this yet, so we should debate this tonight. I guess one question we ought to consider is our school board, does it make a difference? Are school board members compensated, or are they paid a stipend?
They're paid
I don't think
stipend.
that term matters. In the statute, it actually uses the word salary,
Okay.
which is an even worse term. But
Yeah,
from like an
it is.
employment law perspective, it's not going to make them employees. They're not employed. So a stipend, you could use that word. It's income though, that's why. They're not
Right.
employees, but it is income.
It's definitely income.
So do volunteers, right?
Like when
In
it's the lottery, you have to declare it.
I mean, I know a district where the board members are eligible to receive health insurance, so they're sort of treated as this weird hybrid.
So do I.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. Is that Manchester do that?
Maybe, yep. That's why a lot of people
What a
run.
boondoggle that is. Right. That's
One
worth it.
question I have is,
That's
let's
20 grand
just,
a year.
I think it states now that the compensation of the Concord School Board members is commensurate with the salary of the city council members.
Yeah, that's section 6 in the charter.
Yeah,
So we're,
What if this doesn't pass?
it goes back to,
Act.
yeah.
Right. So you can't just eliminate something from the charter.
Well, you can, but it'd have to be 2 votes, right? So you could, I mean, I haven't really thought about that, but you could vote to eliminate that language entirely, and if that passes, then make a conditional vote, then to adopt new language, but
No,
I'm
I
sure you
mean,
wanted
is there
to do
any
that.
way you can, the voters are, I keep asking this question, and I'm sorry if I ask it too many times, but the voters are going to approve, the first thing on the ballot is whether you approve the commission, the charter. Do you approve the new charter? Is that right?
I'm not sure, I think that.
That's what it was last time.
but that's because it was from whole cloth.
Okay, so the first question is not gonna be, do you approve the new charter? The charter stands as is unless something voted by the voters overrules pieces of it.
yes.
I
That's
get
a good point. So the charter exists, and unless it's changed, modified, or a section is removed, it's going to continue being the charter
It is.
until that happens. And the process that you'll follow here is, I mean, theoretically, you could do like a whole. Here we're presenting you with a whole new thing, but that's not really what the legislation provides for. This is much less of a revision, and it's just an amendment to some sections. So what we're seeing here is probably 5 different
Ballot
votes,
questions.
ballot votes on different subject matters,
Uh-huh.
shall the charter be revised as follows? And it'll contain the language and some explanation, something like that, but there will be multiple votes.
But
And
we have been very cognizant of the fact that the next election will be one that's probably more highly attended and more voters in it, and that the threshold still appears to be 60%. And so, it's a different voting, demography, next year than in most years. And, only one's better than that one. And so we've been very much aware of the number of questions. Do you favor this, that, or the other thing, at a minimum? And so if there are places where a couple can be sneaked in one place, that's helpful.
That raises an interesting question, which I haven't really thought of. Do these questions go on the ballot in 2022?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, next time.
The target is November.
Clint, I think
November
if we were to take, if we were to simply ask to eliminate the provision regarding compensation from the charter, there's a question of whether the school board would have the authority to award themselves any compensation at all. So I think you have to leave that.
Yeah.
You have to move to amend it, and if it isn't amended, the old provision stands.
Do you agree with that, Jim? That,
Yeah, like, I mean, you could try to eliminate it, and then, like Bill said, you're back to the question of, do they have any inherent authority to award themselves a stipend? And again, you're in a unique place. So there's only one law, and it says the district at an annual meeting can determine the salary for school board members. So you don't have an annual meeting. The board is the legislative body, so you don't fit into that peg very smoothly. So I don't know. Someone theoretically could challenge that and say, well, the board had no legal authority to pay its members or whatever a stipend. So at least the current language allows them to receive some stipend.
I think so sections 8 and 9 don't cover that in the current charter, action by resolution and general powers.
Maybe.
I think what Clint is probably worried about is, what we don't want is a ballot question that, sets up alarm bells for people who are particularly fiscally conservative and, are going to think this is a boondoggle, for.
Yeah, and what Bill wisely would have said that I didn't is that is a standalone. That would be the only question. We're not combining with any other questions. If it even gets put out there in the first place, we've sort of separated that one so you could debate it and decide, never mind. But if you do put it forward, it's its own thing. If there's a big risk that people are going to reject it, it won't infect other amendments. Okay, forgot about that. Bill
Which
told
is
me.
good, but then the school board is still stuck being tied to the city councils,
Yeah.
which is not
It's not what we were
not
hoping
what we
for.
want, but, yeah.
But that's why I'll ask it again just one more time, because you said it's possible. We decide to change the whole charter. And then ask the people to vote the charter, 50% vote yes, 50% vote no, then it's back to the same charter. And there's no questions.
I'm not even sure you can do that.
I'm just curious.
So,
Now, if I ask that question again, will you want to turn to me and say, you moron, you asked that question?
I'm not even sure you can, since you have a charter and you're not proposing a new form of government, I don't think you can propose a whole new charter. It's just not a big enough change. And I agree that it would be in some ways just easier to say, you only have to vote on one thing, yes or no, but
You'd have to put the whole thing on the ballot, is the problem.
yeah, it's just not.
Okay,
And you'd have to look up the changes.
And who would run for charter commission?
Yeah, so these are good questions, but we can keep talking about it and see if, I think the best. This is actually like maybe 11 or 12 actual amendments, all being told, but they've been combined with each other in subject matters to kind of narrow it down to 5. If we can get it to 4, we'll try to get it to 4, but right now, this is the groupings that Bill and I came up with after we spoke a couple of times. All right, I'm gonna move on to the blue.
Okay.
This is impossible to read.
I want you to know I am red-green colorblind, partly.
It's terrible, isn't it? Sorry.
I can see some of this.
Well, this is just what we talked about all along, just to change the language to allow for the
Yeah, it's not all.
appointment of a clerk.
It just literally it says everything. All this other language about legislative changes. It's all being erased, and it's just literally going to say the board shall appoint a district treasurer, a district clerk, and a deputy clerk, and such other officers as are necessary to administer the affairs of the district. The powers and duties of those officers, or these officers, rather, so appointed shall be those prescribed by state law, by this charter, or by board resolution. I want feedback definitely on just the language of that, and I just was wondering what you thought of the word "or."
And by resolution or by, is that the question?
Yeah, because it's powers and duties. So, you know, the board can by its own resolution assign more. You know, it's like you can assign more duties. I don't think they can assign more powers.
And doesn't work there.
Yeah.
Because then it would be the powers and duties that are created by
Yeah.
those three things together, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
But I'm not talk to the grammarian here.
Well,
Right.
I questioned or, when I first got it from Bill. I'm no lawyer, I just read
You
it
don't have
as
to
a
be a lawyer.
layperson. What?
It helps not to be a lawyer.
Well,
Betty.
maybe so, because I'm practicing it, because people who will be voting on this are not generally lawyers. But yeah, the word "or" bothered me, because I thought this or that, or
Yeah,
any
it's-
one of them, or any.
Yeah, I didn't like it either. So my way of usually dealing with that is to just reword it, so I avoid that problem, and I haven't really thought about that. But
Okay, so,
I just noted when I don't like the word "or" there, because it's well, which one is it?
As long as you allow by board resolution.
Yes.
Because, for example, they already did pass a board resolution relating to the duties of the clerk and the treasurer.
wow. That one needs more work.
Yeah. I can play with that, that's fine. I'll come up with something. It's just a word. That is the only thing in blue.
Yep.
So the question, I mean, folks can think about is, can we pair up amendments? Do you think, you could pair up sections that, it's getting nuanced, maybe Clint, this could be your pet project. What is a subject matter, right? Because that's, in the charter and in the statute itself, it has that terminology about, what you can amend. Let me find it.
I think we can think about that. I think you've done a really good job with this, and I thought except for colorblind people, I thought that the colors were really helpful. You haven't talked about the revision or amendment
Yeah,
yet.
no,
Yeah, no, I know. So here, it's just so that you can have this in your mind, both the statute and the charter, when they talk about amendments, they use this is the term. So each amendment shall be limited to a single subject, but more than one section of the charter may be amended as long as it is germane to that subject.
So if there's a reasonable link between
So
two, you can somehow,
How do you define, what is the subject? And I think we can say, organize the ballot, this is removal of obsolete provision is the subject, and then we have all the things where we're proposing to delete obsolete. That's how I think we could do it. I think that's fine.
And-
how
and-
cute can we get with it? I don't, I mean.
We can do all we want to with it, and the Secretary of State may say
Yeah.
something else.
Send it back.
Exactly.
You know, my daughter, when she was in California, they have so many amendments every election that she gets a book about this thick that describes, you know, section 22 on the ballot will say this, which is a sentence, but this is what it means. Are we going to have to do that? And then they mail it to every voter?
We're gonna have to
There
do
are-
something.
That's why their gas prices are so high.
Yeah, there's going to be some of that happening. I mean, that's already what's in the sort of the document that Bill did. That's what that is. And we're going to
Yeah.
prepare some of that in our preliminary report, and then we'll just borrow from it in our
Yeah.
explanation. But yeah, there has to be
Something
the
of that
language
nature.
plus the explanation is
Yeah,
part
okay.
of this.
Good.
Otherwise, it would be hopeless. They would have no idea. They probably still might not totally understand. You read the amendment, you read the one paragraph, and you're like, I don't know what that really means. But it looks good. Okay, yes. The last provision, the last change, is in. You don't even see this, but in the current charter, starting on page 8. No, actually, before that, starting on page 5, and all the way to almost the end. Process for revising and amending the charter, which someone told me you were told you had to incorporate all that language in the charter. The last charter commission was told that.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense to me, because then when the home rule statute changes to sort of prescribe the process for revising and amending, you're then left with having to kind of interpret your requirements and also make sure you're complying with the state requirements. And there's already a little bit of that happening here. Your charter has a 231-day deadline for the final report. The state law has a 245-day deadline for the final report. Your charter only requires like one public hearing. State law requires 2 public hearings prior to the finalization of the preliminary report. So what rid of those 9 pages and incorporate by reference RSA 49B as it is amended from time to time. And then the last part of it is provided, however, that at least a 3/5, 60% majority vote is required for the passage of any revision or amendment, because that's the current charter requires a supermajority vote for any change to the charter.
Now, before you get too far into that, I don't know how I happened on this, but on page 5 of our charter, as it exists now, and 1/3 of the way down the page, it says Charter Revisions, number 19. So it's page 5 of 14, and then it's item number 19, Charter Revisions. And I'm looking at Roman numeral 1, and that is distinctly different from what follows. Method by which the school board itself can bring to a vote whether there should be a charter commission at all. And so I just don't want that to somehow get folded into the 49B stuff. In other words,
Is it part
we
of
haven't talked
49B
that
now?
much about it.
Well-
The 6-member school board vote.
I'm just asking though, Betty, is that provision part of 49B?
I wouldn't think so.
I don't think
I
it
thought
is.
there was, I didn't, we talked about that the statute only requires 5 school board voters, but we have 6? Or am I mistaking that?
Vaguely remember.
Or you're talking about the vote, so there's 2 different questions. One is, just to get the questions clarified, does 49B allow the board to create its own charter commission?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think that's in 49B.
Well, we need to solve that problem.
Yeah,
You
that's a
just
good
need to
point.
look at that, because then we'd have to amend the language and so, let me go back. This is a suggestion that I made the last time around, which is if somehow we are simply setting out verbatim the terms of the statute, that makes no sense at all, because then the issue that you raised before occurs. We have a procedure set out that tries to conform with the statute, that's then amended. You don't want to do that. You just want to reference the statute as amended from time to time. Because anybody who looks at those 9 pages in our current charter could also go pick up the RSAs, or go online and find them, and you'd find exactly the same language. But if ability of the school board to call for a charter commission, that's different. So we need to figure that out.
I agree.
We don't need to figure it out tonight, Jim. I think we just need to figure it out.
I agree.
And I guess my question would be, can we have a provision for the school board to be able to call for a charter commission, as well as then, if the public wanted to call for a revision to call for a charter commission, just then refer to 49B?
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
Two different methods.
Yeah.
Unless there's something in RSA 49B that prohibits it. If 49B is silent on it, then we can adopt what we want. So there are 3 options. 49B includes it, we're okay. 49B is silent on it, so we want to adopt it, or 49B precludes it, in which case we couldn't do it. But I doubt that that's the case, or it wouldn't be in here now.
I suspect that the question is, can the board do it without the authorization in the charter to do it? And that's the hard part. That I suspect you're going to need to have language in there authorizing the board.
If
Like
we want
Betty
the board to
suggests.
be able to call for a charter commission to amend the charter, it's gotta be in the charter. That would be like saying,
Yeah.
you don't have any process for amending the US Constitution, but we just know it's there.
Yeah. It's very tricky too, because you are the legislative, the board is the legislative body, but typically you'd have to ask the voters to authorize. So if you want to avoid having to do that, grant to the board itself so I have the question, I understand. And that may mean we don't get rid of all of 18 through 24. We just get rid of some parts of it and leave intact section Roman numeral 1 of 19.
But that was my question, and as I say, I went and looked at that and I thought, uh-oh. And as a group, I don't think we've talked about school board, call on the basis of 6 members or more. It's only been mentioned a few times, but we haven't had any down and dirty, on it, and so I don't even know how the group feels. But I don't think that we wanna throw the baby out with the bathwater, the bathwater being, process.
Okay. I agree. That's a good thought.
Do you
So
think I missed my calling?
we know you did. I think those are good questions, and we'll wanna look a little bit more deeply at 18 through 24 and see if there's anything in there that, and I think folks who are on the last commission, anything in here that's sort of a special thing, I don't,
So my eyes glazed over when I read this language. It's drafted off of a state statute, which is as clear as mud. But the question then becomes, Jim, you've got 2 avenues to go down, and one of them is the school board can call for that charter commission. Does that simply get set up because the school board wants to do it without any input from the voters? Or do some of these provisions that follow also apply where the school board proposes to set up a charter commission, which would then still have to, unless the school board has full authority to simply appoint those members of the charter commission, there has to be some means of doing that.
I know.
So-
And the process doesn't, so I think part of the reason why the statute doesn't have this in there is that the governing body has some pretty good leeway within 49B to propose amendments. I mean, we haven't talked about that, but this commission makes the proposing of amendments to the charter sort of a complicated, lengthy process, whereas in a lot of municipalities, the governing body has the ability to propose amendments and kind of have an expedited process to get it before the voters. So it's not the only,
But isn't the governing body really the voters, not?
no, the governing body is the board. They'd have to put the question before the voters.
Right.
So the statute, if I'm reading, it's 49B4E. I think that's what this was probably written to sort of mirror. But it's probably been amended since it was, right? The municipal officers may determine that a revision of the municipal charter is necessary and by order submit the question of establishment of a commission to revise the charter to the voters in the
What's the
same manner.
section again? 49.
B4-e.
That's for a revision. That's why it's crazy. Yes, the municipal officers may determine that a revision of the charter is necessary. And so that's for the revision of a charter. but
Isn't
you-
that the section Betty was talking about, 19.1?
So
Yeah,
what I'm pointing out is there's two,
Yeah.
the term revision versus amendment is now much more meaningful in the law than it was when the charter was adopted. So the process for a revision requires commission and a lot more process than if you're just proposing amendments.
So Jim, I mean, we could discuss this all night, and we can all look at RSA 49BE, but I think, 4E, but I think you just need to go back and give us some advice on, are there two avenues to go down, and if so, because all we've described now is one. We've described the 49B process of petition by voters, and we just need to
Which is
figure out.
long and boring and changing.
Jim, I remember back in 10 years ago, we went over this very carefully, actually, because we wanted to make sure that anybody that felt like they were going to change anything, to make it a higher bar than just, let's do it. So it was a contentious issue at the time, but everything said we want to follow the law, but any adjustments we want to make so that they call it a supermajority, but 60% of the voters have to pass it. Is that how the statute's written?
No,
Not anymore.
no.
So it's just majority?
Yeah, it's a majority for an amendment, and a revision, I think, is this, and I'll have to look at it again. But there's a lot of aspects of it that are not anything like what's in here now.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a charter commission under 49B in order to propose amendments and submit them to the voters. It's a pretty expedited process under 49B. And amendment procedures are a lot more simplistic. And it's an easier process in the law right now. I think what makes the most sense is if I sort of write it out and lay it out for you, so everybody can sort of see what the options are and put their eyes on it, and we can have a conversation about that. It's impossible to go through all of this and talk about it and everybody be able to sort of retain and me be able to explain. It's just there's too many moving parts. But you're like, I think the thing to understand, this is where we left last time, your charter right now can't really be modified without a commission, or there's the petition process, but without a commission convening and a 3/5 vote. That's how basically it's locked down in your current charter. The state law is a little different, and there may be aspects of the state law that you don't want to become part of your process. And that, in order to know that, I've gotta lay it all out for you, and we have to talk through all
Yeah,
of this.
'cause I don't understand what you just said, Jim, because it seems to me that our current charter does have a provision by which the school board can decide that revision of the charter is necessary, or even adopt a new charter. And then there's a process for how they go
Yeah.
about that. But let's just sort it out. That's fine.
The part about how many voters needed to sign a petition and how petitions were set up, I'll tell you, that took an awful lot of back and forth before we came up with,
Yeah, and-
some people wanted to make it impossible. Other people said, that's crazy, we've gotta make it so someone can do it. Hence the law, the reading you have there, which is, like, the whole thing is confusing.
It was more than confusing, it was boring.
Well, that too.
I think that was the point Tracy was trying to make in the last couple of meetings, that,
Yeah.
it's just too difficult to make
Well,
that.
I don't wanna relive those days.
Well, it's my, it's frankly my job to make it less confusing for you.
Okay.
And it's hard because the charter itself I've spent a long time trying to figure out what it actually says. And I think you have to sort of figure out what it's trying to say, and then you'll understand what it says, just the way it's drafted. So my job is to kind of hold each, maybe even like a side-by-side comparison on a piece of paper.
You're just not an originalist. If you were an originalist, this wouldn't be a problem.
So,
I
it's true.
think that, of course, I don't have the best memory in the world, but Bill, I bet you would do that with Bill Ardinger, who was there, and every time we needed to do something different or change something, we asked Bill to help us with that, and he would work, we had other attorneys on the
Yeah.
board.
So he may have already a head start, and he may jump on it, but I want to produce something, the information that you need, that you can all understand. That's that's what I'm supposed to do, and I don't want to make it overly complicated, so maybe an outline of some kind where the two parts are compared, and I'll work with Bill on
It's
it.
probably easy enough. Look, what you're proposing at the moment, at least what Bill's drafted is, the procedure we would put in place would be 49B. So all you really need to do is outline the steps of the statute that someone has to go through to amend the charter. I go back to, though, if we want a different process,
Yep.
we gotta see what how those two avenues work.
Yeah, I can there's already you require a 2/3 vote of the board. The statute would only require a majority vote of the board. To pass the ballots, the statute requires a majority of the board. You currently require a 3/5
And
majority.
I think we're entitled to do that, right?
Yeah, my position is, and again, AG, Secretary of State's office, that you can set a higher bar. That doesn't put you in conflict with the law. And that's what your current statute says. So we're gonna maintain that position. But that's currently what it says here. So knowing that's what it says, that's what the law says, it may not be very difficult to sort of remove and then just replace by reference if there are so many sort of special components of your current, but we don't know what all of them are, and I haven't really dug in on that, so I'll do that in a way that is easy.
You have your homework and we have ours.
You guys gave me homework again. And I haven't even talked to Bill Ardinger yet, so.
Can I just add one? I was looking at this and we talked about reducing from 5 to 4. Is there any way to combine numbers 2 and 4 and just call it the board election process and appointment of officers?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. In terms of combining it, it all falls under election stuff. Subject matter, elections.
Just so there's only 4 things seems more palatable for a voter than 5. I mean, 3
Subject
things
matter,
would be
election,
better.
appointment of officers.
I would have thought, Tracy, it would be easier to combine 2 and 5. Because they all deal with,
And then we pray that they don't get returned.
2, 4, and 5. Combine them all.
Let's combine everyone. The title will be changes to the charter. That's the subject.
Or, yeah.
Clint likes that.
come back with a proposal.
Yeah, I'll let me play with that.
No, seriously. So you have some things that you're gonna
Yeah.
work on for us. And we have the charge that we're to, go at this in depth in the privacy of our home or on our porch or wherever you think best. And jot down notes in the, outside columns and come back and settle some things. And, am I right or wrong on the idea of, two-thirds of the board being able to call for a revision or an amendment? I don't recall us talking about it. Or we could take a straw vote tonight, I mean, but if we're not even interested in doing it, then we don't need to have them do the homework. Or are we interested
Are
in
you
seeing
asking,
it?
are you
Yeah.
asking, is that the way it's currently written, or the way we are thinking about
No,
talking about
I'm
it?
just saying, are we in favor of it in general, in principle? The 30,000 foot law, are we in favor
Right,
of
sure.
that?
I think it would be helpful to get kind of, this is what
Yeah,
the law
exactly.
requires, and then this is what we.
Well, then that may help us decide.
Yeah, and then we
right,
can make
yeah.
those decisions.
Which
from
comes
there.
first,
Yeah.
the chicken or the egg? Okay,
I can already see, I think, where this is gonna go. You're gonna leave some of your, figuring out where it's sort of your Concord version, figuring out what that is, and then omitting the stuff that's just simply duplicating statutory process. Somehow do that in a way that's clean, and then just incorporating those parts of the statute by reference or something. There's gotta be a way to do it, but I will do the side by side, and maybe Bill and I can even work on a version where we take a shot at doing that.
I mean, the real question is, if the school board, if we want a process in which the school board can effectively call for an amendment to the charter, how does that get to the voters?
Well, there's already a process in the statute, just the board proposes it, and it has to be passed by the Secretary of State's office, and then it gets put on the ballot. That's it.
All right, well,
do
It
it.
doesn't
that's your
require.
job. That's your job, is to come
Yeah.
back to us and tell us how
Exactly,
that
what's
works.
the difference between the statute and the charter
Right.
process? I think based on my reading, I'll go through it, but I think right now you require 2/3 of the board. The charter only requires, it just says the governing body shall, and governing bodies typically take action by a simple majority, so I think the original charter set higher thresholds for any changes, including board initiated changes. That's what I'm reading.
As it should, in my view, but.
And
Well, we did have a long person in the community about the supermajority.
But everybody
Crap,
processes
crap.
differently, so my job is to lay it out so you all can see it and process, understand, and make a determination of how you wanna move forward. And I'll talk to Bill about it, and I have my homework.
Just a few quick
Yeah, I already-
questions. So I'm looking at, in our current charter, section 19. Am I reading it correctly that what it allows the board to do is call for a charter commission?
Yes,
Not place an amendment on the
Yeah.
ballot?
yep.
So one of your issues is, are you going to retain that? Am
Yep.
I right, Betty? That's what you just said.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then the second question is, where does the board's ability to put the amendment itself on the ballot for the voters directly, where is that?
It's in the statute.
49B.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why this is,
It's painful.
Commission members, do we know what we're up to?
Yes,
You know,
we're asking our lawyer to come back and tell us, give us advice.
Yeah, right, and, okay, and you've taken copious notes, I've watched.
I understand what the,
Thanks, Jim.
I
And
understand what my job is.
The document you gave us today was really good and very helpful.
Oh, this has moved us forward.
I wanna say, I can send somehow a version that's less horrible to look at.
The yellow and the gray are spectacular. Everything else is a struggle. But
Maybe just gray.
I love gray.
Just put a cross out beside it, this is
I'll
what.
figure that out too, 'cause
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim.
For the next 10 minutes.
Thank
what
you
we do.
very much.
You're welcome.
I feel like
Thanks,
we've
Jim.
made some
Thanks,
real
Jim.
giant steps.
I'm excited about
Is
my
it a
homework.
debate or just a chit chat?
Take a deep breath, glass of water, and on we go. At this point, we're ready for community input. Charlie? Aren't you glad you came?
Yeah, Charles Russell of Concord. Basically, in answer to your question, if you look at page charter the current charter 21, it talks about the school board having the ability. Page 9 says the school board has the ability to put an amendment to that. It does. Okay.
That did come from the first.
But anyway, yeah, and I watched late at night and saw Tracy's zone issue idea, and so I kind of did some revision myself. I'm a general practice attorney and certainly don't profess to have the expertise of Mr. O'Shaughnessy. And I too have trouble reading those letters, the colors. But I sent around something on a revision of qualifications, and as it reads now, it kind of speaks in the negative. If you look at paragraph 5, it says, see if I can find it here, it says, starts out, no person shall be a candidate who isn't. It's like, gee, that's a pretty negative voice. You know, I'm a math major, I've written an awful lot, so I proposed here, let's be a little more positive. A candidate, and I've sent this around, a candidate shall be. Instead of saying no, you get double negatives, and and you get your triple negative, and so let's, there's a movement out there, it's called plain English versus legalese, and I've always favored the plain English. So on the zone issue, I think if you put the words voting district in quotation marks, that becomes a term of art that equals that. The confusion is you've got district, which is also school district, and then you have voting district. But I think if you start putting in the word zone, then you've got to go back and you've got to amend other parts of the charter, and it sounds to me like you want to keep it as few changes as necessary. But that's my idea, and I appreciate the due consideration you've given. At the end, the last full sentence, basically, well, through it says, if you move out of the school district, see you later, and we're going to fill. But the last sentence, I guess, raises a thought to consider. Board members moving from voting district A, B, or C, but remaining within the school district shall stay on the board, stay on as a board member until the next election. The thought being, you're taking an oath in January, the election's in November, you've got 10 months, so maybe they're gone 5 months. That would be the average halfway if you had a bunch of this happening. But you've got somebody trained, particularly, that either if they have more than 1 or 2 years already, and you have somebody that knows what they're doing, they're up to speed. So now you're going to say, I'm sorry, we're going to get rid of you, even though you've been here a year or 2, or you're in your 3rd year. So the thought may be whether you want to save the expertise they already have, as opposed to bringing somebody who presumably, unless it's a former board member, wouldn't have as much expertise. So that's, I guess, a philosophical argument I think you may want to consider. In law school, I learned from a couple of bright professors, write so as you are not misunderstood. And when you start doing no person shall be who isn't, that kind of is heading down that path. So I guess the other thing I have a thought is, and I guess going to some of my electoral and political background, why is Concord so special that it can't, like the rest of every other school district, elect a clerk or treasurer? Why do we need to spend time and money and energy trying to get a special law put through for Concord? Apparently that was, looking at the charter, apparently that was tried back then. I think what's happened in the last decade with the presidency and maybe some of the things that went in on the legislature with a conservative speaker, that there may be reasons why, but the issue isn't let's take the power away from the people that every other voter in a school district throughout New Hampshire has and allocate it to somebody to appoint them. I mean, isn't the issue more why aren't we recruiting more people? Why aren't we making it more easier for somebody to decide to run for that? Somebody is an accountant in an accounting firm. Gee, maybe you'd want to be treasurer. You know, you got some expertise. The same with a clerk. I think I already told you, I went over to Roger Phillips' office the last day. I had called up a few times and saw that nobody was running for clerk, and I walked in at 2:30 in the afternoon. Anybody file for clerk? No, well, I guess I'll file if nobody else is gonna file. Not that I needed the ego of being elected or serving in the position for the tremendous wages it pays. And I filled it out. I didn't fill out the back. And then at that point, Patrick Taylor came in, and he said he's filing for clerk. I said, great, I don't need to file. I guess there are good people out there that will do it. So it's more of an issue of promoting people to run, as opposed to maybe the school district or the powers that be in school administration don't want the general public to come in. They want to handpick their own people. I mean, slap my face for saying something like that, but you know, why aren't you out there, as I said earlier, why isn't the newspaper, which isn't here tonight, why isn't the newspaper and Patch and some of the other things, Concord TV, out there promoting in April, May, and June, hey, we got some school district positions coming up. The issue is promoting people to get them there. And then, of course, as Jonathan, the school district, Weinberg, said, you need to pay them an amount. So I appreciate your consideration, the ideas. I know they're not all going to fly, and I'm not sitting at the table to vote on them. And I appreciate your due consideration on those things. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yes, Scott?
Good evening. My name's Bob Cotton. I'm on the school board, but I'm here on my own capacity and not representing the school board. Just wanted to make a brief comment on 49B and your deliberations on that. I would caution you, or ask you to consider at least, not making it too easy to change the charter, either by the board or otherwise. I think a supermajority, 60%, 66% is a good thing. I would remind you that 49B has been changed before, and it can be changed again. And I think if Concord wants to keep the school system similar to what it currently has, it's probably wise to ensure that it takes more than a simple majority to change things, because I think there's a risk that certain groups from one side or the other come in and try to change everything, and then it's very hard to change things back again. Thank you.
Bob, would you, I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
So as it currently sits, with the proposal that is in this current document, and I think which is consistent with what we have now, would you change the 60% requirement, or?
I wouldn't necessarily change the 60% requirement. My
You
concern
don't want a
is
50%.
simply relying on 49B to be the answer to everything. I think it's important that the Charter Commission weigh in and make it the way Concord wants it.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm taking off my staff hat, just speaking for myself. I would like to make sure, I'd like to ask the commission to make sure that however you end up putting the former motion number 14 on the ballot, which is the vote that you took at the last meeting, that if someone elected from a zone moves out of that zone, ward or zone, that the seat shall be declared vacant. I would want to make sure that I'm going to vote against that as a voter. I strongly disagree with, and you're all entitled to your opinions if you want to put that on the ballot, but I want you to put it on in such a way that I can vote against that. Of examples, for example, we're in a board member's 5th year. We're in the middle of building a new school. They decide they want to move to the other side of the city. It's January. We're in the middle of building a new school, and all of a sudden their seat's vacant. They're the chair of the Capital Facilities Committee. I can come up with all kinds of examples of that where the expertise of a seasoned board member is absolutely critical. When we lose seasoned board members in difficult circumstances, as we did fairly recently, it put the administration in a terrible situation where the people we needed to rely on had left. And of course, we rely on the new people, but it's hard to get a seasoned board member. It's hard to get an excellent board member who stays long enough to become seasoned. And I wouldn't want something as arbitrary as lose that, and that's why I would vote against that. So, thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is there some merit to the idea that even if someone left their zone and moved to another zone, that the theory of the Concord School Board membership is that you are representing the whole community. You represent every school, every student, every taxpayer, and even as long as you were in the community, in the district, even though not in the zone from which you originally ran, would that sort of thing help?
I'm only speaking to the zone issue. If someone moves out of Concord, they are off the board.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about moving out of Concord. I'm not.
But it is, you're right, Betty, it is in policy 110, the School Board Code of Ethics, that once elected, you as a board member are representing the entire city. It's all students and all taxpayers.
So maybe the magic of getting on the board comes through the zone, but should the magic of you being a good board member be you just have to stay in the city?
I mean, that's my opinion. That's how I would want to be able to vote on this issue.
I'm just trying to understand how you feel, and I understand the example that you used. And I understand too that we just had a 5-4 vote on a very important piece of facilities. So these are real issues, folks. They're not just hypothetical, make up a what-if thing. If you've ever been in a classroom, the thing that you hear constantly, yeah, but what if? And, you'll go along with it, yeah, but what if? And you're giving us a yeah, but what if? And I appreciate that.
Well, I wasn't in favor the last time of establishing voting districts. I unreasonably makes it difficult for someone it restricts them in terms of where they want to move in the city. I don't think that that's fair. It costs them their board seat, which we all want. We want people to stay long enough to become experts in a very large budgeted area. I mean, I have some previous board members here who have served long enough to know that it takes at least 2 years, at least 2 full budget cycles to understand fairly comprehensively what you're doing, and where you have a 3-year term, if you decide to move, people are going to move. They're going to say my residence is more important than my seat on the board, but that's a loss for us potentially. And I just think it's an arbitrary
Any further
decision.
questions for Lyndon? As
Thanks.
always, we enjoy and we think about the things that you were. Okay, we're moving into.
I move to approve the minutes of the February 22nd meeting.
There's been a motion to.
It is.
That's
I
what
said, I move to do that.
Okay.
I second it.
Is there any discussion? If not, we'll vote on the, approving the minutes of the, last meeting. All those in favor will say aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed, there are none. Anyone abstaining? The minutes are passed and approved. Okay, I love this group because, we're very flexible. And quite frankly, in my opinion, we've already done number 5, the work session. And didn't we do it with Jim as he went along? I had thought it was gonna be presented just a little bit differently, but unless someone feels like there are issues for us that we can tend to tonight, I would be open to a motion to adjourn.
I don't want to prolong this meeting, but I don't think we have voted on or discussed motion 15 and 16.
Okay,
So let me say this. I don't think we've discussed and voted on those. We had a lengthy discussion at the last meeting on the issue that Lyndon just raised. I don't want to revisit that issue tonight. I would rather, I would propose that we vote on 15 and 16 tonight, discuss them, and then if people want to go back and revisit the ward issue, we could do that at another time. I think the biggest problem with the ward issue is, okay, if they're in their third year, that's one thing. If they're in their first year, that's something else. So we were trying to figure out how you deal with that dividing line. And purpose to ward voting, people ought to live in those wards, but we can come back to that. Because one option, I suppose, would be to leave it to the discretion of the school board, but then you get into the issue of, there's certain people they might want to remove, and others they might not. So my suggestion, just for tonight, is that we put that as, we don't go back to that tonight, but that we discuss and vote on 15 and 16 tonight, which I think shouldn't take a long time.
Can I ask for an update on 1 and 2 if we've met with the AG's office before we move on to there?
Mr. Ardinger has indicated that he will set up a meeting with the AG's office, and we haven't done that yet.
yeah, that's on hold still.
So we've gone back to Bill and said, set that up.
Okay,
Betty, one other piece of business, can you, tell the commission about the second public hearing that I unilaterally put on April 12th?
I need to clarify that with, we did do the calendar last week, and we set up a public hearing for April,
No, May 10th.
May,
is
May,
the one you
May
voted
10th.
on.
Right,
But then in my conversation with Jim O'Shaughnessy, called me later that week and said we need 2 public hearings, so in the interest of covering you, I posted April 12th as your first public hearing.
But
You don't have to do that.
but we
And
won't
Betty
have
said
our,
she's
we
not
won't have our
ready to
preliminary
determine.
report. We don't have to have our preliminary report by then.
You don't have to have one by then, no.
Well,
Can we have a public, what would the public hearing be on if we don't have a public report, I think is
yeah,
the-
I mean, you've gotta have the preliminary report, then the public hearing follows within a certain period of time after that. And I think we discussed the fact that we might get the preliminary report done earlier, but
who knows?
I think Jim's concern was his reading of 49B. That it doesn't have to
there
be
is a
on April
process for 2
12th.
public hearings in there now, I think.
We
No.
only scheduled one, and so I just wanted to make sure you were covered. I'll change it back to a regular meeting for April 12th, but I just wanted to raise that.
Well, you acted with due caution, and if we have to have a public hearing, it will have been noticed properly.
I
Can we,
don't have to change it yet.
okay, can we leave that one till next week? When we can press Jim a little more on that, and Bill will definitely be back next week. So theoretically, we have scheduled on April 12th, prior to the due date of the preliminary report, a public hearing. If we find that's not necessary, then we can just simply use it as a regular meeting, if we have a regular meeting to hold. However, we do have one on May 10. And that brings us to, I think, the question of, shall we go on motions 15 and 16 now? And I think we've discussed them. As I understand, well, do you want to say what you've understood about motion 15, Bill?
Can I suggest we start with 16, because I think that's the
Pardon?
easier, can we start with 16? And maybe just vote
Yeah, I
on
mean,
it?
an
'Cause I
easier
think
way,
that
an
one-
easier way to do it, Kay, would be to say, we have language in here
Yeah.
now that's already been drafted to address these 2 issues, but I think you're right, 16's easier, so.
I mean, I'm willing to make a motion to include language in the charter to require financial disclosures by school board candidates.
And I'll second it.
All right, is there any discussion? Is that what it- or a
If
vote?
that was indeed a motion.
It was a motion. I'm willing to, and I did.
I
like-
didn't want it to get away.
Yeah.
I like,
It's a little bit complicated. No, on the financial, that's fine. Yep.
Yeah, well,
I understood it, and I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah.
so
well, we're gonna have
use that
another,
as the bar.
we have another
We can
whack at
fine-tune
it
it.
next week. So if we're just.
It's the word,
making-
the only, yeah, well,
But that we can
I was
fine-tune, we're
thinking
just
about
taking-
the odd numbered, even numbered years for the compensation, which seemed a little complicated to me, but
Well, I think the idea was, well, you know what it is, not to be voting on your own salary unless you re-up.
well, let's vote on Kate's motion first.
All right, would you restate it?
I move to include a charter amendment that would require school board candidates to file financial disclosures when running for office.
Is there a second to that?
Tom
Tom
already
second.
said.
All right. Is there any discussion? I can't imagine there would be. Do we need a roll call for that?
No.
No. Those in favor would say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? There are none. Any abstain? No, there are none. And so we've officially handled that. Is there anything else, Hank?
15?
15?
Well, I think the objection to well, the comments that people have raised is, do you want to set any limit in compensation? And I think we sort of come around to the conclusion of that is no, let the school board make that decision. Maybe the reason that Bill did it in odd and even numbered years is so that you've got at least,
3 members.
well, yeah, it seems to me the problem is that you could have the school board could vote to raise their compensation to 3 members. And those members, if the public doesn't like the level of compensation, are likely to get voted off the board they may have actually voted against the increase. What you'd really like to have is some process in which at least a majority or supermajority of the board would have to vote for that. But, you know, the reality of it is that board members, the way to deal with something that you don't like that the board has done is to change the composition of the board. So I don't know. Maybe we should just vote on this. Vote on whether. So I'm going to make a motion, and that motion is that we adopt a provision in the charter, which provides, for lack of a better word, disconnects school board compensation from city council compensation.
Yeah. No
And
question.
allows the school board to set compensation for school board members. That's my motion.
And let them worry about it.
Why do we even have to add the part about let the board set their own compensation?
Because if we disconnect it from, because otherwise there's no, if we just voted today that we're going to disconnect school board compensation from city council compensation, and that passed, there's no ability, there's no charter provision that allows the school board to set compensation.
Okay, just,
That's what we discussed with Jim earlier.
yeah, okay.
I'll second the motion.
You second the motion. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I like it because during my time on the board, I had a lot of feedback from people. And if they didn't like something that we were considering, they'd tell us. And they'd tell us pretty
Quick.
straight out. Yeah. And a lot of the voting that, you know, I think we all did when we served was based on what we heard. Sometimes it wasn't popular, sometimes it was. But, you know, the issue of full-day kindergarten comes to mind. You know, we had a big bill to change over to natural gas versus steam, and it was going to cost a lot of money, and we couldn't do full-day kindergarten. But we did hear a lot of information, and we always hear a lot of information.
Really?
So I
Big
don't have a problem with this because of that. I think that school board members will listen and hear You know, if someone's not happy about them, quote unquote, giving themselves a raise, and they'll vote accordingly.
May I make a philosophical comment? My goal, while I've been here, is to both protect the Concord School Board and empower it. Now, empowering it means that they, or they collectively, need to do certain things. And some of those things may not be popular, and if they're not popular, they should hear about it. And therefore, I'm saying that empowering the school board, you also give them not only the opportunity, but the responsibility to take on the tough issues. And something like stipend might come under that, because it lands on people different ways. And so I don't have a problem at all with the motion, because I think it puts the school board, puts the onus on the school board to handle a matter that may be delicate, sensitive, and all the rest of it, but they will need to handle it one way or another, yes.
And if we think further about it, we've talked about the benefit of having an increase in stipend, if you will, so that we can get good people on the board, keep good people on board, get people who may not otherwise be able to be on the board. And that this answers that question. I mean, because we've decided not to have another charter, or at least the voters will decide that, we decided it, where would a raise come from? It would never happen again.
I think what I struggle with on this is, you know, if I had all the power in the world, I would like to give them a raise tomorrow. You know, but my concern is if we put a dollar amount in a ballot question, there's a group of voters who are gonna be so put off by that they'll vote no, and then we're left with what we currently are, and that doesn't help us.
yeah,
So
I think
it's
there'll
trying
be
to
a-
figure out a way to allow it to happen, but that unties us to the city council.
I think there's a danger in this, and the danger in it is this autonomy question, right, which is people don't like the school board being autonomous. To your point, Tom, when I was on the board, I heard two things. You're not accountable. You know, you take these actions, you're not accountable, to which my response was, I'm very accountable. You just vote me off the board if you don't like what I'm doing. The second thing that I heard a lot was, you don't listen to what we say. And the answer to that was, just because we don't do what you want us to do doesn't mean we didn't listen to you, right? But I think it's a couple of problems. I don't think that charter commissions should be in the position of making decisions on things like compensation. And so and I don't have any idea what the proper compensation for school board members should be. I also don't think this is gonna be up to the school board, but people should not be serving on the school board for the money that they get for serving on it. It's just my view of the world. You should be doing it because it's a service to your community. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to do it. So, but anyway, we do have a motion on the floor and it's been seconded. So.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
And Bill's packed up.
Call the question, you want me to call the
Well,
question?
We can stay longer if you want, Kate. You argued in the Supreme Court, you know what happens at the end of the argument. You can always tell when they've stopped listening to you, when they start piling the briefs up on the table.
It's over.
It's over, right? Yeah.
I've got my stuff stacked up. I'm calling the question. Those in favor will say aye, please.
Right.
Aye.
Are there any nays? There are none. Are there any abstentions? There are none. Are there any further remarks, oversights, comments, suggestions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Is it seconded? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you
Good
one
meeting.
and all.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you very much.